Be me, an officer in the Navy some years ago. I enlisted in the Navy from a young age. My family has kind of a long history of enlistment, and I guess hearing stories from a young age kind of rubbed off on me. Once I hit enlistment age, it didn't really seem like I had any other options available to me. I wasn't exactly academically smart, so off I went. This experience happened to me back in the 1990s. It is still something I cannot explain. I was stationed on night watch with one other crew member. We were on the deck of a frigate. Just a routine patrol in formation with some other ships. We are both bored out of our minds. Just doing very routine stuff. Scanning the horizon with binoculars, checking for other ships and other hazards. You know, that kind of thing. I shit you not. We have had idiots out on small fishing boats out here in the dead of the night before. No lights, no kind of gear to signal that they are there. Literally just asking to be rammed and killed out at sea. Sometimes, it feels more like a job babysitting idiots than actual military work sometimes. The weather is calm, and there is absolutely nothing going on at this time. We have not had anything to do out here, and we are both just dead tired. Don't even have the energy to chat and swap stories, or even to just talk shit about other people. It is insanely dark out. The moon is low, and there are basically no stars visible in the sky at all for miles. Felt really eerie and unusual for some reason. The majority of the crew at this time is asleep in their cabins too. The only ones awake are me, my watch partner, and the officer on deck. If you're not familiar, he is in charge of the entire ship and crew, and acts as the commanding officer's direct representative. He manages navigational plans, operational plans, safety of the vessel and crew, and blah blah blah. I did not mention, but this is basically my first ever long patrol. I am still really green at this time, and so life is currently very, very shit. I get no respect. I am treated like trash, and I get all of the worst possible roles. Like swabbing the poop deck, if you catch my drift. I am just sitting there, staring at the horizon, barely keeping consciousness. And then I spot something. Way, way out on the horizon. It looks like some kind of fucking light. It looks like multiple lights. They are small and fast moving. Maybe 5 or so of them from what I can make out. They are quite far out though. They are a mix of like green and red lights. If they existed back then, I would compare it to the small lights that you would see on a modern drone. It's just like a small cluster of them. At first they are just stationary almost, just bobbing slightly back and forth to the left and to the right. But after we start observing them, maybe a minute of us doing this, they start moving. They start moving in random patterns, mostly doing circles in the sky in the distance, sometimes doing zigzag patterns, and then moving unpredictably after that. I could not believe my eyes. I am looking at my watch partner like, are you seeing this shit? He doesn't even say a word back, he just nods apprehensively. I say wait here, and say I am going to get the officer on deck. I try to be as formal and respectful as I can, but I'm obviously a little panicked at this point. Like I said, I am a newbie, so I still have really big nerves. I have never seen anything like this at all. There is no protocol for this. I'm like, sir, you need to see this immediately. It's something we cannot identify. At first, he makes fun of me. He laughs in my face and is like, okay, you need to look a little harder and then figure it out and then come back and tell me. But I insist, it is not something normal that I could properly describe. He scoffs at me and looks incredibly annoyed, but pushes past me out to the deck. I follow along hurriedly. When he gets to where we were on watch, he just goes dead silent. He is not laughing or scoffing at me anymore. His mouth is just entirely agape. I ask him what it is, what the lights are, but he shushes me and tells me to pass him the binoculars. He stares for a good minute before calling over another senior crew member. He is just as shocked as the officer on deck is. The lights are moving faster now. They are moving much too quick to be any kind of craft that we are aware exists. They are all moving at unnatural angles, and it now seems more like a swarm of bees than a cluster of lights. Out of nowhere, the lights stop moving rapidly, and before we can even comprehend it, they have shot up much higher into the sky. There is a trail in the sky behind them, like when you see a plane or a rocket fly up, or like when a flare is fired. It made a noise too. It made an incredibly loud bang that startled us and set off a chain reaction of people waking up and the ship being put on high alert. It sounded like when a firework explodes, but it was just this cluster of lights shooting up and moving closer together. Whatever they were, they must have been incredibly fast, because we heard the bang way after we saw the lights fly up. Right before us, the lights start to get brighter and brighter, becoming almost blinding at their brightest point. The whole fucking ocean is lit up like a carnival. Once they had reached their peak brightness, they start to converge on each other, like slowly circling each other and getting closer and closer until they combined. By now, alarms are going off. Everyone is awake and manning their posts. So many people are sitting and watching in awe. The other ships in formation have all had the same things happen. They are radioing us desperately, asking what is going on and what we have seen. The officer on deck can only assume it's maybe a possible missile test or an unidentified craft. But there is no way they would do a test like that without informing us and the rest of the ships first. At the very least, the senior officers would know and would not be shocked like this. As soon as the lights in the sky combine into one bright, blinding white light, it shoots down. It shoots down directly into and under the ocean at a speed that my eyes just could not track. It took my brain seconds to process what had happened, and by that time, the shock wave had hit us. There was so much force from the impact that there was a massive splash, and you could hear and feel the aftershock. The water ripples for quite a while, and you can see a light still shining up from under the water. Again, bright white, and it takes a long while for it to slowly fade away. Basically, the whole crew is just frozen seeing this happen before their very eyes. After it went under, the sonar started picking up strange echoes originating from underneath the water, directly underneath where that thing had made an impact. There is absolutely nothing on the radar though. The light eventually fades away after quite a while, and everything looks normal again, as normal as it can after all that happened. The rippling water has ceased, and whatever was on the sonar had dropped off the face of the earth. I mean, there was no trace of it. There was no trace of anything anymore. The senior officers are at a loss for words, but eventually, they finally regain their composure. They order everyone back to their cabins and assure them that it was all planned. Everyone except for us, of course, because we are still on watch duty. The officer on deck claims that it was just a field training exercise that was planned by a different ship in formation. He says it was all just to test the alertness of the crew and what we knew about the protocol and to gauge our response time. He gets really serious and says we all perform miserably and to get our shit together. I can tell it's all just bullshit he came up with on the spot. He is a terrible actor and can never, ever hide his true feelings. I have a lot of experience with that firsthand, with how he would ridicule me. He has no confidence in his words, and it also would not explain his earlier behavior. He would not just stand there gawking if it was all planned. There is also no kind of technology available to us that would allow us to put on a show like that in the 1990s. And that's basically all I got. There were whispers and murmurs about it for weeks after that, but all of the senior officers started squashing that shit real fucking quick. Lots of disciplinaries got handed out like hotcakes in an effort to keep it all silenced. Never saw anything like that night ever again in my entire life. Back when I was in the Navy, I was stationed on an aircraft carrier in San Diego. I was specifically a nuclear operator, of the MMN type for those that know. On an aircraft carrier, there are two separate nuclear plants, and I was an operator in number 2 plant. Some background information. Nuclear plants, since the day they first make power to the day that they are disassembled, are required to be constantly monitored by human personnel. They are referred to as watchstander, In the Navy, this extends to all the secondary machinery in the plant. The watchstander who watches over this equipment while the plant is in a shutdown state is called the Shutdown Roving Watch, or SRW for the rest of the story. They are the only required watchstander in the machinery spaces outside of the control room. Since other personnel who aren't on duty are not currently on watch or not required to stay in the plant, it is quite often that the SRW is basically alone in the machinery spaces of the plant. There are other watchstanders who will tour occasionally, but I won't touch on that. On duty days where you would stand these watches, depending on how many people we had, this determined our watch rotation. For this case, I was on what was called 6 and 6s, 6 hours on watch followed by 6 off, and so on and so forth for the 24-hour rotation. I was a fairly new mechanic on the ship and had just qualified SRW. The one thing I heard was that plant number 1 was haunted. Luckily, I was a number 2 planter. Eventually though, to support the watch bill, you might get sent to the other plant to stand watch on a duty day. What happened to me was the first and last time I ever stood watch in number 1 plant while shut down. I was the back 6 SRW for number 1 plant, 2 p.m. to 8 p.m., 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. on this duty day. One of the senior mechanics, I will call him Juan, told me that if anything happened, to immediately call him in the briefing. He told me specifically that one area of the plant is haunted, so do not spend too much time in there alone. Being a somewhat new guy, and Juan being somewhat senior, and since we are both unfamiliar with each other since we operated in different plants, I brushed this off as standard hazing to the new guy. I will say that this area of the plant has some pretty good air circulation, and it being the only place in the plant without any steam piping meant that it was generally colder in the area than anywhere else, especially with the majority of the plant shut down. In number 2 plant though, it wasn't insanely different, but for whatever reason, number 1 required a damn jacket just to walk through. I accounted that this was mostly due to better airflow or something like that. About an hour into my 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. watch, I stopped in that area to take a small break from roving. I had set my log clipboard down on some valve hand wheels. Since I had just woken up from only a handful of hours of sleep, I was rubbing my eyes pretty hard. It's important to note here that mechanics are not allowed to sit while on watch. We are constantly standing for our whole watch, which is a good way to not fall asleep. Well, while I was rubbing the sleep out of my eyes, I had suddenly felt like I was pushed and ended up face first in the deck plate, busting my mouth open pretty bad. My first instinct was that Juan was in the plant and had seen me looking tired and decided to rectify that situation with some physical motivation. But when I sprung up, I was completely alone. And since the plant was shut down, you can damn near hear a pin drop, let alone sneak up on someone wearing steel toes on diamond deck plate and then run away without them hearing you. I chalked this first one up on that I had just nodded off and fell, despite me rubbing my eyes for only a couple of seconds. The second part though convinced me. It's hard to explain to someone who hasn't worked on suspended decks. You can basically tell when someone is walking on the same deck frame as you, as long as they are not trying to mask it, and you are not standing near any operating machinery. On my second tour of the plant, 0300, I was back in that specific area of the plant taking logs, and I could not stop feeling as if someone was walking on the deck plates behind me. It was the same feeling as if you knew that someone was looking at you. The creaks of the deck plate did not make sense for the areas that I was stepping on, but again, I chalked this up to me being overly familiar with number 2 plant and not number 1. As I was nearing the final portion of that area's logs, it requires you to look above the access way to the next watch station to record some tank levels. I swear, I heard some footsteps on the deck behind me. I immediately whipped around, ready to actually pounce on Juan. There was nothing there. As soon as I turned around though to finish my log set, a 1-ton chain hoist that had been set up for some maintenance suddenly started having its pull chain start cycling. If anyone has ever operated before, you know that a chain hoist does not start moving randomly. Combined with phantom footsteps, the fall, and the sudden chain hoist cycling, I immediately noped the fuck out of there, dropping my logs, and practically sprinted to the other end of the plant. I took that ladder well 4 steps at a time, and the subsequent next ladder well, to get to the deck where the control room was. I immediately ran inside, which to any nuclear trained personnel would tell you is a huge no-no without the reactor operator's permission, and called berthing for one. He came down sleepy-eyed but understanding. He told me he refuses to be in the area of the plant alone while shut down, and knew something was up. He stuck around with me for that section of logs from then on. Other mechanics would talk about other crazy stuff that happened there. And when I left the ship to become an instructor, I would tell nuclear trainees that got assigned to that ship to never go down there alone while shut down. Hey, hope you've enjoyed the story so far. If you want to hear more, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment because it lets YouTube know you like the content and helps more people to see these videos. My next big goal for the channel is 100,000 subscribers, and as a celebration, I will be doing a Q&A video once we hit that goal. Thank you, and back to the stories. Be me, an enlisted Navy officer of many years. I served on a destroyer in the Pacific in the early 2000s. If you've never been out there, you have no idea how empty the ocean can feel. There is just nothing like it. You could steam for days, and the only thing you will see is water, grey sky, and maybe the occasional seabird. When something breaks that monotony, you notice and you fucking remember. We had just finished a long joint exercise with the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force and were moving south along a shipping lane. It was uneventful. Everyone was bored. I could feel my brain turning to mush. I was working as a sonar tech back then. Lots of long hours were spent with headphones on, just staring at the waterfall display, just logging contact after contact, each and every one. It still worked most of the time, but you learn to notice anomalies, even tiny ones. That's what happened. That's all I can really call it. Just an anomaly. Because I have never seen anything fucking like it in my entire life. We picked up what looked like an object in the water directly ahead, floating stationary. At first, it looked like a regular shipping container that had fallen off of a freighter. This isn't exactly uncommon working this job. These fuckers get careless and do not triple check before setting sail. Or if the waves are particularly bad, it can cause big problems for ships like that. We slowed down and adjusted course. The captain ordered a team out on the RHIB to inspect. That is a rigid-hulled inflatable boat for those unaware of the term. It's basically a lightweight vehicle with lots of inflatable tubes for buoyancy. It's mostly used for things like search and rescue. I was not part of that team that was sent out, but updates were being sent back basically every second. And we all heard the story when they came back. You couldn't not hear it. They came back with pieces of netting. This wasn't fishing net or anything standard that you would expect to find in the ocean. It was like a fine mesh, synthetic, but unlike anything we recognized. The weird part was the scale of it. It looked like it had been designed to ensnare something massive. There were cable-thick lines, interwoven with mesh large enough to let a car pass through. The edges were melted or fused, like it had been cut free with heat. We logged it, bagged a sample, and continued. Strange, but not strange enough to cause concern. I mean, ships run across weird junk all of the time. Maybe they were deluded fuckers, thinking they could catch a sea monster or something like that. But then the sonar lit up again. We hit a steady contact about 200 yards below the surface. It was pacing us. It was a huge reading. We could not classify it. It certainly was not a submarine operating in the area, as we would know well ahead of time. The size profile was completely inconsistent and did not match that of a whale. This did not match anything that we had on record. I remember hearing whispering and murmuring about it, but nobody said shit out loud. I mean, you can't. The only options are A, pretend it is normal, or B, panic, and the latter is not something that you can ever afford to do in the Navy. The contact followed us for almost 2 hours. The captain eventually ordered us to go quiet, with no active pings or any unnecessary comms. He just wanted passive listening. That is when things got worse. We started hearing impacts. We shit ourselves, thinking they were explosions and that we were under attack. But we quickly realized that was not possible. It was just soft, heavy thuds against the hull, like something was brushing against it. It had to have been something small. It would not have been loud enough to be a small boat, or anything of the sort. It was more like the kind of sound you get when a sea turtle bumps a ship. Only it wasn't one or two thuds. It was dozens of them. Dozens of thuds in sequence, traveling along the length of the ship. The deck crew almost immediately reported seeing shapes in the water. At first they thought it was debris from the netting, but no. These were objects. Dozens of relatively small objects. They were translucent and faintly glowing, and trailing us on either side. They looked like jellyfish, except they were fucking massive. More like the size of a car than anything else. One of the junior guys swore he saw one press itself against the hull and hold there. He said it was like looking at an embryo against glass. Told us he could see the veins inside the thing and something twitching inside. He obviously got laughed at until more people started seeing them, and then they shut right up. The captain did not want it spreading through the crew. He did not want a panic to start. But how the hell do you contain that when people can see it out of the portholes? Sonar was still tracking the big contact beneath us the whole entire time. We still had no idea what it was, and if these jellyfish-like creatures were connected to it. It couldn't be a massive swarm of them because it was only one massive sonar ping. I wondered if maybe these things were its prey, and somehow they had gotten swept up somewhere by accident and dragged this thing up. I do not claim to understand what is under the ocean. I am not a marine biologist. Underneath the ocean is a cursed place. Eventually, the glowing shapes peeled off and started drifting away. After that, the contact dropped out. It was just gone. We thought that was the end of it. About 4 hours later, the engineering watch reported pressure fluctuations in the forward ballast tanks. Then the port side intake pump started failing. When they opened it up, they found the filter screens clogged with the same translucent material. It was like flesh and it stank. They had to scrape it out with crowbars. Samples of it were bagged up to be sent off for research. None of us ever heard what came of them, but it's not exactly my area of expertise. They were taken off at port and handed over to some shore unit. We thought maybe that was it. Bad luck made us encounter some weird ocean shit. You see plenty of that. But here is the part that still bothers me, years later. The next day, we picked up a distress call. It was a civilian freighter who was about 30 miles out from our position. He was reporting a collision. They said something had wrapped around their propeller and rudder. Told us that they were like dead in the water. We responded like usual with standard procedure. We got close enough to render aid, and their crew was already frantic. They swore they had hit some kind of drift net, said it was not fishing gear and that it was not anything man-made. They had a diver go down to check, and he came back shaking. He would not even talk to his captain. We got eyes on it ourselves. The entire stern of the freighter was entangled in that same netting that we had seen before. It had the same fused edges and the same weird synthetic lines, only this time, it was alive. I don't mean moving on the current. I mean the strands were flexing and contracting like muscle fibers. Parts of it tightened when we touched them. Our divers refused to cut it loose. They were Navy divers, tough as hell, but they flat out refused. Said the moment they got close, they could feel the water vibrate, like standing near a speaker turned up high. We left the freighter under tow to a Japanese salvage crew and got the hell out of there. It got chalked up to some fucked up fishing gear that had been left to rot. But that is the biggest load of bullshit I have ever heard. I am keeping my name, rank, and job private for the sake of anonymity. I should also mention that the military is very big on information leaked to the public, so I am not going to release any information that I am not allowed to release. Any opinions that I have are my own, and only my own. I will disclose that I am in the US Navy, and the base in question is Great Lakes, Illinois. I just graduated from boot camp. While I was there, some strange things happened that me and some other recruits could not explain, and I would like some answers. Here is the story. When you are in boot camp, you have to stand watch occasionally for a few hours. I was usually put on watch at night. Me and my partner usually stood watch from midnight to around 2 a.m. My job was usually roving security, which is basically the person who patrols a set area and takes temperature readings and looks for suspicious activity, etc., etc. Usually the most serious things I dealt with were other recruits messing around in the bathroom and telling them to go back to their bunks. One night around 2 in the morning, I was making my rounds and thought I heard talking coming from the bathroom. I went inside and heard whispering coming from the showers, so I walked towards them, and what I saw was just weird. I saw a young man around 17 to 20 years old, hunched over, facing away from me in the darkest corner of the shower area. I walked towards him and said, "Hey man, I need you to get back to your bunk." And as I was approaching him, I swear, he vanished into thin air in the blink of an eye. I remember the feeling of pure shock and confusion. When I walked out, the other guy on watch asked me why I was so pale, and I told him what happened. I told him exactly what I had seen, and he said it was most likely a result of me being tired from all of the stress of boot camp and the lack of sleep. I agreed with him, because I figured why would a ghost haunt a shower at a boot camp of all places, and I was pretty tired that night. The next night, I did not have to watch, but the recruit who had my usual shift reported seeing a shadow in the showers and some weird whispering noises while there was nobody there. I talked to him and told him what I had seen, and that it was most likely our minds playing tricks on us because we are all tired. He agreed, and we decided that we should just ignore it. That was until I started seeing things outside the showers. I had a slightly earlier watch that night, and I was patrolling the bunks, checking on recruits who were sick, as I am supposed to. I was walking past some empty bunks and saw some movement in the corner of my eye. I figured it was some recruit messing around, so I went to tell them to go back to bed. But as I approached the empty bunks, I saw some kind of shadowy figure that did not look humanoid to me. It was like a black blob moving around. When I investigated, it vanished. The area it was in was extremely cold compared to the rest of the room. I just walked away as there was nothing to do there and figured that the staff must have cranked the air conditioning and I was just tired and making stuff up. I saw this out of the corner of my eye all throughout boot camp while on the early morning watch. The last story from me was when I was tasked with taking temperatures throughout the whole building. My job was to go to each division's compartment and ask for their room temperature. I had just taken all but 2 other division temperatures and was looking for the last 2. As I walked past some empty rooms, I could have sworn I saw movement inside, so I figured maybe I missed a room and went to look inside their window. The room was just being used as storage and was pitch black, except for the light from outside. All I could see were some boxes and empty bunks, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw a person standing at the edge of the light facing me. I saw this and decided I was just going to look elsewhere for the last 2 rooms, which I found a few minutes later. However, as I was returning to turn in my readings, I noticed in the hallway a shadowy arm or limb being outstretched and coming back behind the doorway, and when I passed, there was nothing, but the area it was in was super cold, and the room, it was just a closed janitorial closet. The other recruit I previously mentioned spoke about seeing somebody dancing in the showers at night, but there was nothing when he investigated. He also said that one night he passed by the showers and saw someone peek out and disappear behind the wall. There was nobody there when he investigated, but he noted that the area was really cold. I know full well that no one is going to believe me. I know I am going to get called a liar and an attention seeker, but I know that all of these incidents are completely 100% true and that I experienced them. I am not in this to make the military look bad. I am simply trying to find out what kind of entity me and that recruit may have been dealing with on that ship. Also, I cannot disclose much information as I do not want to get in trouble with the chain of command.